Welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. I'm Jan Johnson, a seasoned believer who loves relationships and, just talking about Jesus. Welcome, my friends, to episode 26. Angie, you have an adoption story. You want to share that with us?
You do. I was adopted when I was about 3 weeks old by my mom and dad. And then let me just start that anything I say from here going forward, when I say my mom and dad, I mean my adoptive parents. Five. So anyway, having said that, when I was about 25, I'd always kind of wondered. My parents told me from the get, I don't ever remember not knowing I was adopted. So there wasn't some like big talk or revelation or anything like that. Curiosity more than anything. It wasn't a need. I didn't need a mom. I didn't have something that I wanted to be filled, but I was so curious. And so I kind of played around the edges of it. And I was adopted through an agency, and it was a closed adoption. And so I thought I'd just like poke at one piece at a time, and then it all just undid itself at once because I got to the adoption agency. I wrote a letter. My bio mom had written a letter. Someone opened the file, found both of them in there, and contacted me and said, "Look what we found. Do you want to know her?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but you contact her. I'm scared." And so they did, and it was wild. It really was, because it happened so quickly. I was more in shock, I think, than anything at first, as far as how I felt. I was excited. I was anxious. I just had I probably sweated a lot because I had a lot of really intense emotions, is what I remember.
What did you expect it to be like?
That's kind of a hard question because I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I didn't know if she would like me, hate me, look like me, not wanting to be with me, if I'd be a disappointment. I didn't know. And so I didn't really have any expectations. I was just scared, honestly.
And so what was that like?
Well, when I met her, finally, we talked on the phone, we exchanged letters, talked on the phone, sent some pictures back and forth. This was a long time ago, so we didn't have any Zoom or anything like that. And then she came to the city where I lived. And when I met her that first time, and of course we had a little bit of history now because we've been talking, but when she stepped out of her vehicle and I saw her, it was like a moment that was unlike anything I've ever experienced, because I looked like her. I've never looked like anyone in my life, right? I don't look like parents. I don't look like my brothers. And we are carbon copies of each other. And it went beyond that to where we have like, I don't know, traits, like we cross our legs the same way. And I mean, just a lot of really weird things that shouldn't be possible when I didn't grow up with them. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I didn't know what to expect. And so I kind of just was taking it as it came.
Mm.
It was honestly, it was a pretty insecure place that I was coming from at that time, because I mean, I'm the, excuse my language, but bastard child, right? Who wants anything to do with me?
Right. Right. And you do hate to think that, because then you're wondering, well, why did you find out why she chose adoption? Or
I did. And let me just say that I will be forever grateful to her that she gave me life. It was 1964, but I still could have been an abortion easily. It would have been so much easier for her. And she chose not to do that. And because of that, I'm sitting here. So I'll be forever grateful for that. She's actually older than my adoptive mom, which is kind of unusual. She was in her 20s. Just an unexpected pregnancy and no marriage, looking forward to in the future. Again, 1964, right? And you're not an unmarried mother back then. And so she went to a mother's home, placed me for adoption.
how did your adoptive parents react to you deciding to try and find her?
I don't think I told them when I was looking. I think I told them after I had located her. because I didn't know. And honestly, that was a very insecure place too. I don't know if that's the right word. It's really not. But anyway, I was fearful of hurting them. I don't want to hurt them by saying I want to go find this out, but it doesn't, please be secure that it doesn't have anything to do with you guys or, who you were to me. You're my parents, all of that. And so it was hard to go have that conversation. But you know what? I did not get a bad reaction from them at all. There was nothing bad. It was more of just, I guess it felt like acceptance at the time. And I asked my mom actually this week, how did you feel when I told you that I had found her? And she said, we were just happy that you had connected. And so that was really interesting. And then she told me this. She said, do you know that we were in the process of adopting you before you were conceived?
Mhm.
And I think about that, but they put in their paperwork to adopt the baby a year before I was born.
Uh,
So if you think about the way God works, right? That
right.
He had me planned for them before I was conceived. So
Yeah,
she pointed that out. That was pretty cool.
that is exceptional. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then you have some siblings as well?
I I do. I got actually four. I've got three more brothers. That's a lot of brothers, isn't it? And one sister. I'm in contact with two of the brothers. One of them actually just came to visit me a few weeks ago.
Oh, very cool.
Kind of unexpected, but it was very cool. We had a great time. And so I asked him, what was your reaction to me? I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, because yeah. And so he said, well, I was very angry at first. And I was like, well, this is news to me. Why? Well, it turns out he had not found out directly from bio mom. She told someone else who told him. And that was really upsetting. And I totally get that. I'm like, how did you not transfer that to me? And he
Yeah.
goes, well, because he's a guy and he's just really practical. And he's like, well, because it didn't have anything to do with you. So anyway, we and I said, well, what did you hope for? I know that I hoped for. I didn't need any more brothers, but I was hoping for a good relationship, right? And he said, yeah, I just have hopes for a good relationship, and we've exceeded that.
Wow.
So that was I'm glad I had both those conversations because those were things, to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's neat. So it just expanded your family. Yeah. There's
Mhm.
different endings.
Well, there is, and that's the whole process of the story is different for every single person, and it depends. There's a lot of factors involved. There's a lot of personalities involved. We have, in my case, a mom who had never told anyone in her family, literally, not a single person knew I existed,
Really?
and so yeah. So talk about
Well,
awkward.
that's
Hey, you're a family reunion. Here I am. Guess who? You know,
was the
and
culture back then. Yeah, so she's
well,
held on to that secret all those years. That's
I mean,
yeah.
that's the culture. You hide your sin,
Yeah.
and
It was, and I don't know, she's at the ages because of the time when this was and the ages that they are then and now, it was never very comfortable for me in the bigger family, settings. I always felt like somehow I had done something wrong, is what it felt like to me, and that I was the one, and yeah, so that was kind of hard. I mean, they weren't mean or anything like that. There was just something, that was uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Huh. Jackie, you had an experience on the opposite side. Tell us about that.
that's because I'm a birth mother. So I have given up two children for adoption, and I could go through my whole family history, how I got to that place. The long story, my grandmother was a teenage mother, single mom. My mom was no, my mom was married. Well, she got married because it's funny stories because my grandmother caught my mom and dad having sex when they were 16. And so they lied and said I was pregnant. They were pregnant with me. And so so they had to get married and then they had to prove their lie. And so then they got pregnant with me. And then my father left my mother when she was pregnant with my brother. So she was 19 with two kids and a single mom. In fact, she was pregnant with my brother when my father left for the woman that he's married to now, still married to. So then, so I'm raised in a single home. I was first person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone go to college, let alone, get out of the inner city of Buffalo, New York, really poor family. And I always promised myself I would never be like my mom, and then my mom died when I was 18. I had a massive stroke. She was 36. I was 18 and homeless, and then found myself pregnant, because I, was reacting, I was a mess. I was a mess, and
for love. You're
pardon
looking
me?
for somebody, you're looking for somebody to love you.
Right. Take care of me in this awful time. And, the father was, an earnest Christian, but, we had our issues, and so I find myself pregnant, and then I'm thinking, well, he's going to marry me, because, I'm 19, and I picked up everything I had and I moved to Ohio where his family was, with the idea that he was going to marry me. And then when I got there, I was not received well. Let's say that, because it didn't go well. So I was counseled that I would either raise the child on my own. I was not going to be getting married to the father of the baby, because they had deemed that, the authorities around me had just said that, or I was going to place the baby for adoption. And I couldn't even think about adoption at that time. But I didn't want to be a single mom, and my grandmother was like, well, you can come back to Buffalo and I'll help you raise him. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to, I just could not do that. I just did not want to be the way my family was. And so I still hoped that they would, I'd still get married. And then I was like 8 months pregnant. And I just really, it was one of the first time I heard the Lord talk to me in a visual way. It was kind of like an audible way. And I was trying to make something for the baby, for my daughter. And I heard was, you're going to hurt your baby the way you were hurt. And I knew right then that I needed to place my daughter for adoption, because I didn't have the tools. I didn't know how to parent, because, I was physically and sexually molested as a child. And that was my norm. I watched my mother get beaten up by her boyfriends and the police not intervening. It was just in the safe place, but that's what I knew. And so then I placed, I always like to tell people, I wrote my memoir about this. It's like, I was the doctor's worst nightmare, because I walked in, I had no prenatal care. I was like 8 months pregnant when I saw my doctor the first time, so I was a mess, had hypertension. But the Lord brought this family that took me in, and they got me maternity clothes. And I remember sneakers, brand new sneakers. They got me glasses. I didn't have anything, and took me to all my prenatal appointments, and were with me when I delivered my baby. And so I placed my daughter for adoption. I didn't get to hold her. It was closed adoption as well at that time.
And at that point, you were the answer to their prayers.
Right. Yeah. And so I met the family. So it was called a pseudo open. No. Yeah, it was a pseudo open adoption, meaning it was with the Lutheran Community Services, and they were like, you have to know the family to do it for a lawyer. And the other thing was they wanted I was told they wanted me to go in unwed mother's home, and I refused. I was like, I am not the only person involved in this. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I refuse to be sent to an unwed mother's home. I was very stubborn, but I was,
I don't
so
blame you from the stories that I've heard.
yeah. So I think God protected me there. So I was in the hospital for 10 days, and when I was in the hospital, I couldn't hold my baby. I couldn't see her. A volunteer dropped off photos on the bed for me to see the bedside stand. And that was the first time I saw what my daughter looked like, and was through a picture. And I stole one. They came back and they're like, oh, we're sorry. You weren't supposed to have these. Because, it was always made you feel guilty and shameful. But I did steal one, and I still have that photo. And then I made the father of the baby. He came and visited me. I said, I want to see my daughter. So they wheeled me down in a wheelchair, and I could see through the glass window back then. And they held her up and showed me to her. And then And I remember the nurse coming out and saying, you know, you can't love her like you want, and we're loving her for you. And I just lost it. Yeah. So then I left the hospital and she did. Yeah. So then I wasn't allowed to grieve. You know, I was told to get a job and I went back to school.
Act like
And
nothing even happened.
nothing happened. No, nobody knew. I mean, the school didn't even know that I had gotten pregnant because I was pregnant when I was I was going to get kicked out of college. They knew I was pregnant. I wore big sweatshirts. And so then I went back to school. I took a semester off, you know, because I was hoping to have her like September 4th, because school started September 16th. That was my brain. I was, you know, not thinking, I was just trying to survive. So she came September 17th, and then I missed going back to school till January, but I went right back, but didn't grieve until years later. And then fast forward a few years, thought I had my life all together, ended up pregnant again. But, you know, the Lord was working on, by this time I was in therapy and trying to figure out all these life choices that I was making. And then I knew I still wasn't ready to be a mom, even though I was professionally, I was a nurse, I was a Navy nurse. I would have had all the support systems. I could have done it, but I still wanted better for both of my girls. And so, but the difference was I held my second daughter. That was my stipulation. I was going to hold her for 24 hours. And I did. I held her. I wanted to nurse her. I just couldn't do that. And then my girlfriends all came and sat with me, and we cried and cried while I held her. And then we had an adoption ceremony where I had picked out the family, and we had a service. And so I handed my daughter to this family to raise my daughter. So yeah, so two totally different ways of dealing with that. But the church was with me. I mean, my pastor was there. He gave a sermon that he talked about that, how God has adopted us as his children. And then, you know, so it was a very well done, you know, I thought. Yeah. So yeah.
I never heard of one like that. That is really, yeah.
Yeah. So
I know, you know.
I'm not your typical birth mother. So, you know, it's interesting. But, you know, it's interesting. And so now I have met both of my daughters now. One on Facebook found me. I knew when I signed up on Facebook that someone was going to find me. I figured my second daughter, because that was an open when I placed them for adoption. So it wasn't my choice to find them. They needed to find me if they wanted to. And so I knew that. So I said, I relinquished them into God's hands, and I, you know, just prayed for them that, you know, that we'd be raised and God would take care of them, because I couldn't. And so I didn't feel like, you know, I've heard people, well, my life wasn't complete until I found my child, you know, but I just didn't look at it that way. I looked at it, it was like, this was a choice I made for the better for my child. And I didn't want to mess with their birth order, their life, you know what I mean? Unless they wanted that. So both my daughters found me, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one year, did you go to meet or you're on your way to meet your second daughter?
Well, my first one, so I met my oldest daughter last year, and that was like a total God thing, because I said I did not want to. Yeah. So I did my DNA testing, but I never released it because I didn't want it to be, you know, skewed so that someone can find me. I mean, it had to be totally God. So my nephew contacted me and he said, "Hey, Jackie," and he tells me about this girl he found, cousin. It's like a close cousin. Because at first he thought maybe his father had, you know, done this. And I said, "No, that's my daughter." And he's like, "What?" And so my brother had said, "Well, if you gave her up for adoption, she didn't count." I mean, that was the way my family dealt with this. And so I said, "No, that's my daughter." And he goes, "Because she looks just like you. There you go." You know, it's like it's spitting image. And so I did what every person who does, is like, "Can you show me her Facebook page?" So because I wanted to see what she looked like, you know, and it was very sweet and everything. But I wasn't going to contact her unless she wanted to contact me. And he said, "Well, is it all right if I let her know?" I said, "Yeah, let her. My nephew can just let her know, and that's her decision." And then so she made that decision. And so then we talked for like 4 hours on Zoom the first time, and then we've been talking for a year. In fact, we just talked this past Tuesday, and then on Sunday I'm going to Ohio to meet her in person for the first time in 42 years. So, so I'm keeping my expectations low, I
Do
think
it.
it's gonna be good. I have plan Bs and plan Cs in place, and I come bearing gifts. So
I think one of the weirdest things for me when I met, birth family is that there's really no rules. There's not even a name for the kind of relationship we have with each other
Like,
because,
what do you call them?
right, like
that, yeah, she
birth
goes,
mom
"You
is,
know,
I never called her. I mean, I guess because I was old, I never, she's not my mom to me.
Right.
But she's worked to me, but she's special. She was special to me, in way beyond just like she's not my friend. And so, I mean, it is just a really tricky thing that people who aren't inside of adoption probably
Yeah.
don't ever think about.
Yeah, and we had talked about that because she's like, because she was struggling with that. Sarah, who I'm going to meet, and I'm like, she goes, but we can be friends. I'm like, totally, we can totally be your friend. I said, I am not there to replace your mother because your mother raised you, and I entrusted her you into her care. So
Making it easy for them. You're making it easy for them. Good for you.
yeah, and it is all about that. And in fact, and in similar things, she has not told her mother that we're meeting. And she said, she goes, I want us to have this relationship for about a year and a half. And then so that my mom knows that everything is still fine between us. You know what I mean? I mean, that I'm not a threat,
I get
and
it.
I totally get it. Yeah. And I said, whatever you want to do, and so.
Yeah, it's hard because you don't want to hurt. Yeah, it is really hard. And, all the stigma, we've talked a lot about stigmas today, and you
Yeah.
certainly had stigma as a,
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
year that was. Not
Yeah,
only
in the
one
80s.
baby, but
Yeah.
the wars too. All right.
Oh gosh, talk about suicidal thought. Second time.
Yeah.
I had
But
failed
look at what
jobs.
you have come out of, and you did not repeat that. You did not repeat that.
Yeah.
And, I lived in the same house my entire life, I guess they built it when I was 18 months old. Stable, solid. Parents are still together. They just passed their 63rd wedding anniversary.
Oh,
So okay, yeah, we're a family. So, right. I'm not going to be any illusions that it's perfect because
right.
it's not, but, it was a much better place for me than it would have been had she kept.
Oh yeah. And we talked about Sarah and I, because she's like, we can't do the what ifs. I know. I go, we cannot go there because I would tell you, I said, you would not be where you are today. I mean, she has graduated from college. She has her master's in English. Talk about genetics. I mean, we're like, we both sew costumes. We both love English literature. We both have cats.
Cool.
It's just, and then you see my daughter, Isabel, my youngest, who I have with my husband. Like, if you put all my daughters together in a room, we all look alike, we all act alike, we have the same quirks. It is hilarious.
Isn't it wild? It was
It's
so
wild.
wild. Yeah.
You're
It's
like,
how can this be? I've never known you.
Right. Yeah. So much for environment versus
Yeah.
genetic. Right. Yeah.
Which is a fascinating question for you and I, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool. And then she wanted to know about medical history, especially mental health issues. And I'm like, well, so, so we all have mental health issues, don't we? But yeah. So I have 3 grandchildren that I didn't know. I'm going to go meet my grandchildren. I'm going to know them as Jackie, because she's not ready to go to the ground. I said, that's okay. As long as but she said, but they are your grandchildren. And she's acknowledged that to me because which was very sweet of her. So
she's in a precarious position. I mean, I'm identifying with her big time. And I get every single thing you've said that she's doing or not doing.
And I'm letting her lead. I said, the only thing I wanted to do is like, have our meeting is just the 2 of us without her, without her children, just so that, because I said, it's going to be very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I am anticipating it's going to be, and so I said, I would just like that for the 2 of us. And then, then it's fair game, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Well,
So when I was
exciting. I hope it goes well.
Yeah.
When I was 19, I got pregnant, and the birth dad was from Chicago. I was living in Arizona, went to Arizona State, and he went back to Chicago. I find out I'm pregnant. I call him on the payphone back in the day. And, he said, well, it could have been anybody's. It's not going to be that. I'm thinking, no, it wasn't anybody else, or so, I had to decide what I was going to do. I never, ever thought of abortion was an option for me. And so I put that aside. I did go to an attorney just to talk about it, adoption. And when I told my mom, she says, "You're not going to give that baby up. You're not going to be able to give up that baby." And I thought, oh, okay, well, so I did single parented for 5 years, strong, independent woman that I was, and did things. And now as an adult, after my first husband died, there was some things that because of his being paralyzed and his brain tumor and whatever that he placed on to Nick is that the relationship ended up being kind of skewed. And so after he died, there was just, he started just kind of going his own way and doing things. And so now as an adult, because he's 51 now, and he had a relationship with me for a while. He was into all kinds of crazy, icky things that happened and whatever. But restored somewhat of a relationship to where we were kind of getting along. And then stuff happened. And now he doesn't talk to me at all. So, along the line, I'm thinking, if I'd adopted him out, he might have wanted to find his mom.
Oh, yeah.
Better all the way around.
In those slow moments, right?
You don't know. I mean, there's no guarantees in life, is it? No matter what choice you make, I remember being with Sarah, looking at, it was like a horrible meeting with the parents, my boyfriend at the time, his parents, because they had asked, "Are you sure he's the father?" I just feeling horrible that they would even ask that, I know. And it's just like, your son, does no wrong, but yeah. But anyway, that's what it was. And I remember going home and opening the yellow pages and looking up for abortion clinic, because it was, so it was in the 80s. Well, no, what was it? Yeah, 82, 81, 82. So abortion was legal, and I remember just looking at those, thinking I could just go and do this and I'd be done. And no one would have to know. I mean, some people, but then I could just disappear and go back to school. And I just could not do it. I couldn't do it, and then I just thought, well, okay, but yeah, I know, but when we're in those situations, I mean, that's our reality, is that
my daughter was born when I was 18. I got married when I was 17. I was not pregnant, but I could have been, and that was a foolish choice to get married that young, but that's where my two kiddos came from.
Thought about when we're 18 and 19, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. Those two, if I could have those years back.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
We should do a whole thing on shame and guilt and regret about the difference between those, because that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
You want to do your show, Dan, but that would be a cool
conversations to have. Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. Well, ladies, this has been really good and really, I think, rich. It's a great, two subjects, diverse, but just so gonna touch.
Apologize that I have too hard. I know when I was at the writing conference and I don't write about light. I write about these heavy things.
We were meant to meet, because same for me. I give my book to people, I'm like, it's not a happy book, but my happy book. It's a good book.
Right. My memoir is called Birth Pains, because it's something about, placing my daughters for adoption and how God is good in them, and then my second one is called Messy Mourning and, grieving. And I'm just like,
yes. Yeah. And mine's peering into the tunnel and outsiders looking to grieve, right?
Right. Yeah.
Cover's pretty, but
I want to write romance next.
That's why I went to writing romance after I wrote my memoir, because I needed something fun to do, That's
what I'm like. I'm going to write cat stories. That's right. No.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, ladies, I appreciate this time that you spent with us. This is.
Thank you for inviting me.
I was going to say fun. I don't know if it was fun. It was
fun.
It was a good conversation. It was a good conversation. Yeah.
God is good, right? God is good through it all.
We know that God is good, and we know that not only did he have plans for us, he had plans for our kids.
That's right. And he is That's why we have to release them. He only gives them to us for a short time because they're his, right? They're not ours.
Two different stories, one of being adopted, one of choosing to let others adopt our children, both with their own struggles with identity. But God, the one who formed us in our mother's womb, who knew us from the beginning, who sings over us, what could be better than that? That God holds us tightly in his arms and loves us through and through. We may encounter divine detours along life's paths, and though they don't always travel the way we think they're going to, we know that God orchestrates our lives. We may go one direction, but he still knows the ultimate desires of our hearts and is there to heal and direct and show us our identity in him. Thanks, friend, for listening. Would you consider leaving a review? It's easy. Just give a sentence or two of how this podcast is impacting your life or what your takeaways have been. It would mean so much to me. I'll leave you with these scriptures. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Blessings, my friend. Next week we will hear part 2 of the Angie and Jackie duo, sharing this time about suicide and grief. Until then,